Good evening and welcome to tonight's When She Votes Congressional Candidate Forum. I am Laconga Hilliard Scott, and I have the pleasure of serving as president of the Baton Rouge Delta Alumnae Chapter. I would like to thank the candidates for joining us this evening. I realize that time is of the essence, and we are in the first day of early voting. We appreciate you finding value in spending some time with us this evening. I want to offer sincere thanks to the voters who are seeking additional information as they engage in the political process and finalize their sample ballots. Since 1913, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated has worked tirelessly for voting rights. Social action is who we are. And tonight, Baton Rouge Delta Alumnae Chapter has the pleasure of partnering with a dynamic group of women from across the greater Baton Rouge area to bring you tonight's forum to further educate and mobilize voters in our area. This collective group is a force to be reckoned with. We represent some of the most powerful and influential women in the area, and we all share one thing in common: our love for providing service to our community. And it is our honor to stand with you in bringing this voter education program to further educate and mobilize voters. To my fellow sister leaders of these organizations, whether you are the president, bacillus, executive director, or CEO, know that Baton Rouge Delta stands ready to support your community efforts, and we look forward to future partnerships to amplify our voice where they matter most. Lastly, I want to thank the committee chairs and members of Baton Rouge Delta's Social Action Committee for having the vision to see the power of this collective and to put the necessary work in to make this a reality. Thank you for your service and dedication to this community and for your sisterhood and service to Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and the Baton Rouge Delta Alumnae Chapter. I will now turn the program over to Ms. Constance Carroll, president of the Nonpareil Chapter of Top Ladies of Distinction. Ms. Carroll.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. I appreciate that offer and likewise look forward to future partnerships. I would like to provide an overview on tonight's agenda. We will have an overview of the process to confirm tonight's candidates and then begin with moderated questions for our candidates for U.S. House of Representatives for the 2nd and 6th congressional districts. We will then turn to audience questions followed by announcements and then repeat for the candidates for U.S. Senate. With that, I invite Attorney Kimberly Lamont to discuss the process that led us to tonight's forum and acknowledge the event partners.
Thank you so much, Ms. Carroll. I appreciate that. And welcome again to tonight's Congressional Candidate Forum. As a proud and dedicated member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, I know the value, impact, and power of sisterhood. And tonight, this forum is hosted as a collaborative effort of 18 local chapters and organizations that are either all women or led by a woman, which is why tonight's focus will be issues that impact us as women. Partners, thank you for joining us in planning this forum to educate voters on the candidates who are asking for our vote as they endeavor to represent us in Congress. When we called, you answered, and you answered quickly and without hesitation. These 18 chapters and organizations boast a combined membership of 2,000 women in the greater Baton Rouge community that take voting rights and voter education very seriously. Indulge me as I call the organizations' names. A lot went into planning this forum, and I want to give them their due prior to the beginning of the moderated questions. Power Coalition for Equity and Justice, led by Ms. Ashley Shelton as their founder, president, and CEO. The Links Incorporated, we have 2 local chapters. Baton Rouge chapter, led by their president, attorney Cheryl Hall-Deruin. La Capitale chapter, led by my president, Dr. Sunsari O'Rourke Allen. The National Coalition of 100 Black Women Metropolitan Baton Rouge chapter, their president, Courtney Hunt. Top Ladies of Distinction Nonpareil chapter, and we just heard from her, their president, Constance Carroll. Baton Rouge chapter of Jack and Jill of America Incorporated under the leadership of Ann Tillage. Southern University Law Center Student Organization, Women in Law, led by their president and attorney in training, Jandrea Tatum. YWCA of Greater Baton Rouge under the leadership of Diana Payton. Now, I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that some of the 2,000 women are members of the National Pan-Hellenic Council's 4 sororities. As members of African-American sororities, we wear different colors, but we certainly have a shared goal of service in our community. Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, we have 2 local chapters, Gamma Eta Omega chapter led by their basilisk, Kismet Gray. Nu Gamma Omega chapter, Dr. Angela Gooden serves as the basilisk for them. Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, we also have 2 local chapters, Mu Zeta chapter, led by Cynthia Sampe, Omicron Sigma Zeta chapter, led by Jean Robinson. Mu Sigma chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority, led by Deirdre Harris Stepter. In Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, there are 5 local chapters. Ascension Alumnae chapter led by Shanika Spears. Baker Zachary Alumni chapter led by Melissa Bethley Drake. Baton Rouge Delta Alumni chapter, we just heard from my president, LaConga Hilliard Scott. Baton Rouge Sigma Alumni chapter, Shai Joseph Franklin serves as their president, and Louisiana Tri-Parish Alumni chapter under the leadership of Dr. Erica Joseph. Thank you, ladies, for your sisterhood and community impact. Now, a bit about our process for tonight. All candidates were contacted using the official campaign information listed on the Louisiana Secretary of State's website. Only one candidate did not have an email address or phone number listed. That candidate was mailed a letter via USPS first class mail, inviting them to tonight's forum. All of our organizations, all of our partners are nonpartisan. Specifically, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated is a 501c7 nonprofit organization. All candidates, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, or other, running for U.S. Senator or U.S. Representative were invited to participate. The sorority is nonpartisan and does not endorse candidates. Having taken care of that housekeeping, we can now move on to the reason we are here, our candidates. I will turn the event over to Dr. Robin Merrick, our moderator for the evening, who will begin with our forum rules. Dr. Merrick.
Thank you so much, Attorney Lamont. It is a pleasure to be here this evening and have this conversation that is so important to all of us that are joining and to our community. So as we get started, we want to lay just a few ground rules for the work that we're going to do this evening. And this is the rules for the candidates who are vying for United States Representative. Starting first, each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement, 1 minute to answer each question, and 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order in which the candidates will answer questions will rotate during the forum. Questions may also be taken from the audience via our Zoom Q&A. As moderator, I will maintain order throughout the forum. The purpose of this forum is to provide information and educate voters. Specifically, this is an opportunity for voters to hear your position on issues that impact women. Candidates should not interrupt each other, and all answers and comments should be directed to me as moderator. Comments and answers should be responsive to the questions asked. Language that is rude, profane, or personally attacks a particular candidate or any individual is strictly prohibited and may result in removal from the forum. Virtual backgrounds with your name and ballot number are allowed, but props are prohibited. So we have a few rules for our attendees. We're going to ask that all questions and comments should be placed in the Q&A, and the audience questions will be addressed after the moderated questions. Now, we will try to get to everyone's question, but due to time constraints, we may not be able to. So we've asked volunteers will be on hand to provide responses to your questions for general information as we move forward. So we're going to get started. Candidates, are you ready? And cameras are on, thumbs are up as we're ready to proceed with our first question for the evening. And good evening to all of you. Our first question is a fiscal question, and it comes to us from the Baton Rouge chapter of the Links Incorporated. And we'll start with candidate for U.S. House of Representatives, Dan Lux. We'll start with you first. What are your budget priorities and how do they impact women and families in Louisiana?
Sorry about that. I was just making sure that everything was on. Thank you very much for inviting me here. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with everybody within your organization. I think when it comes to financial budgeting, there's two different levels that we're looking at. There's the federal and then there's the state. We're in much dire situation on a federal level with the debt running at over $31 trillion. It's completely unsustainable. And it's triggering a lot of the inflation. Now, the inflation, we're looking at how this issue affects women in particular. When it comes to the cost of living and the quality of life, it pretty much affects everybody, whether you're female or male, married or single. It impacts everybody on an equal level. So we need to get the federal debt under control. Right now, it's absolutely unsustainable. And nobody's doing anything about it on either side of the aisle. We have both parties to blame for it, both parties to fault. It falls into the hands of what I like to call career politicians. And they have to keep the engine going in order for them to maintain their position. So on the federal level, we got a lot of work. It's not going to be easy. No one person is going to be able to do it. On the state level and the district level, the budgets right now, they're pretty good. You know, we've got a lot of influx of federal money that's going to be coming in through the Infrastructure Act and some of the other funding that's coming on a federal level. What we really need to do is increase the economic engine of our tourism and some of our energy business so we can see that growth for all communities.
Mr. Lux, thank you for that response. And I'm going to take this hit right now because I was so anxious to start our questions and answers that I hopped right into the questions and did not give each of our candidates an opportunity to actually introduce themselves. So I'm going to pause right here and we'll pick up with that very question to the other two candidates, and we will backtrack and have you all introduce yourselves very briefly. So I will start with you, Brian Belzer, if you would introduce yourself to us, followed by Rufus Craig, and then we'll come back to you, Mr. Lux, and then we'll go back into those questions if that's okay. So Mr. Belzer. And Mr. Belzer, this is for the introduction.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can.
Okay. My name is Brian Belzer. I'm a Christian, a father, a husband, and a business owner. Can you see me?
We see you now. Yes, sir.
See you now. Okay. All right, I'll start all over again. My name is Brian Belzer. I'm running for U.S. House of Representatives, District 6, which encompasses 13 different parishes. I'm a Christian, a father, a husband, a business owner, and I am fed up with what is going on right now in Washington. I feel that the career politicians are not worried about anything that goes on with the individuals. I feel like there should be term limits in Congress, and my ideal is 8 years. That's perfect. If you can't get done what you need to get done in 8 years, then you need to get somebody else in there that can do it. I'm big on education, veterans health, healthcare, period, and especially mental health. I feel like if we had more mental health help in this country, which we have enough mental health help. We just don't have the federal government is just acting like it's a 4-letter word. So we need to stop that. We need to correct that. We need to give more money to the states to be able to help on the high school level, all levels basically, but mainly high school and especially with veterans. Education wise, we need to give our teachers the ability to teach. We don't need to take our teachers and regulate them based on government say so. They know what's best for the students. They need to teach the children, our children, based on their education and what they know our children need. They know our children only second best to us. We know our children the best. The teachers know what needs to happen next. I'm also, I am pro Second Amendment.
10 seconds, Mr. Belson.
And I love Louisiana. I love Louisiana. I love District 6, and I want to be your representative for District 6.
Thank you, Mr. Belzer. Thank you for that love of Louisiana. We join you with that. Next, we will hear from Rufus Holt Craig Jr.
Hello. Do I get a video? Oh, start my video. There we go.
We hear you fine.
Okay, great. I'm Rufus Craig. I'm the Libertarian candidate for Congress in the 6th District. I've been a lifelong resident of Louisiana, born in New Orleans, grew up in Alexandria, been in Baton Rouge since 1971 when I came to LSU. I've been practicing law in Baton Rouge for about 40 years as a sole practitioner. I've been involved in thousands of different kinds of cases, met lots of fine people in unusual circumstances. But my main goal is to try to promote a third party. I've been doing this for a while. Most people I talk to opine they wish there was a third party. Well, I'm saying there is one. I've been trying to make one. I've been working with other people trying to create one for a long time now. The fundamental issue, or the fundamental premise of a libertarian is that we each are endowed with the ability to do whatever we wish with our person and our property, with one caveat: we can't harm other people or their property through our conduct. We all get to make our own choices about our lifestyle, what we do, where we go, what we think, as long as we don't harm other people. I'm the only non-Republican, and there, of course, there isn't a Democrat on the ballot in the 6th Congressional District that is not part of what we refer to as the duopoly. I think that a third party could go a long way toward correcting a lot of the partisan polarization that we have in Congress now. The right of individuals to make their own choices is fundamental to everyone. We don't need the government telling us what we need to do. We make our own decisions. I have a wife, I have 4 sisters, and I have 7 nieces. So in my household, women's issues are first and foremost. I think the issue that is on the ballot this time is a woman's right to make her own reproductive health care decisions. I'm the only candidate that believes those decisions should be made by the woman and her healthcare providers, not by somebody in Washington or Baton Rouge. That's their decision to make, their decision alone.
Mr. Craig.
Thank you, Mr.
People
Craig.
make good. Okay.
That's time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, sir. And Mr. Lux, candidate for District 2.
Yes, I am. My name is Dan Lux, and I'm running for Congressional District 2, which includes New Orleans, the West Bank, and winds its way all the way up to Baton Rouge. I was born in a large Italian working class family back in Rhode Island, and it was a multi-generational family restaurant where I learned the value of a hard day's work and strong conservative principles. Money was tight at the time, but I was able to put myself through college. I have a degree in electrical engineering, and I studied MBA at Pepperdine University. I'm a very proud father of 2 responsible, independent children. And I'm honored to be an American, and I'm dedicated to maintaining the purity of what our founding fathers created. I'm a firm believer in the American dream, and I think the American dream is slowly becoming a thing of the past, and I want to try to maintain that for other people and other generations. The reason that I'm running is I share a lot of the sentiments as Mr. Belzer, in that I'm not a career politician, but I've gotten to where I'm also fed up with how our political leaders are running the country, running the state, and running District 2. I don't think a day goes by where we don't shake our heads in disbelief at some of the nonsense and incompetence that we're seeing happening. And I haven't seen anybody else that wanted to step up and make a difference. So that's what persuaded me to get involved. My screen seems to be frozen. Is it frozen?
No, we see you and we hear you.
Okay.
fine.
Okay, good. So there are a lot of issues that are facing our district, and I don't see them being resolved by career politicians. There's a reason that 90% of the country is concerned about inflation. There's a reason that 75% of the people no longer feel safe in New Orleans. And there's a reason that 85% of the country feels we're going in the wrong direction. They're right, because all of this is true. We are going in the wrong direction. And we need to, we need to have some sound minds and some rational people within these leadership positions to turn it around and put us on a course of prosperity.
Thank you, Mr. Lux, for
Thank
those
you.
comments. And again, my apologies for moving ahead.
That's okay.
We will resume where we were on our questions. Mr. Lux has already answered question 1, so we will pose the same question to Mr. Belzer and Mr. Craig. And that is going back to our fiscal matters. What are your budget priorities and how do they impact women and families in Louisiana? Mr. Belzer, we're coming to you first. And remember, you have 1 minute to respond.
As far as budget concerns for women and families in Louisiana, I feel like the federal government needs to be an overseer, and the federal government needs to give the state of Louisiana the money and let the state of Louisiana decide who or where it goes best. Federal government doesn't know the state of Louisiana. Federal government does not know District 6. They need to give the money to the state of Louisiana. They need to give the money to the people, to the organizations that help the families and help the women. And they know more where this money needs to go. And that's where it needs to go. The federal government should not make any kind of decision on, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, or we're not going to give you the money. You know, everything is different. It's not a one size fit all. The women that need it the most need it the most. The women that need some of it give them some of it. But it needs to be at the local level. It does not need to start at the federal government and end at the federal government. It needs to start at the state and end at the state.
Thank you, Mr. Belzer. Mr. Craig, that same question. What are your budget priorities and how do they impact women and families in Louisiana?
Well, my budget priority, when I go to Congress, would be to balance the budget. For years and years and years, Congress has spent money they don't have. They are saddling our children, our grandchildren with an impossible debt. We currently are, as Mr. Lutz said, 31 trillion in debt. That's 31 million. That's right at $100,000 for each man, woman, and child in this country. If that issue is not resolved, the impact not only on women, but children and everybody else is going to be catastrophic. So my priorities would be to bring some fiscal responsibility to Congress, quit spending money they don't have, and then make some kind of determination how to pay that debt off. Because without fiscal responsibility and dealing with the debt, the problems that our children and grandchildren are going to have, they're going to be taxed just to pay for the government that we've already used up. So my priority would be to balance the budget and to deal with the debt.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. We appreciate that. Moving on to our next question. And this question comes to us from the Louisiana Tri-Parish Alumni Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. And it is about the gender pay gap. According to a 2020 edition of the Status of Women in Louisiana, we are last in the United States for what women earn on average compared to men. That's 69 cents on the dollar. Black and Latino women are worse off. They make an average of 47 cents and 53 cents respectively compared to white men. This gap exists in all fields, regardless of profession or educational background, and jobs predominantly filled by women are paid less than jobs mostly filled by men. Do you acknowledge that this is an issue? And if you do, what would you do to address it for the women in Louisiana? Mr. Lux, we're going to come to you first.
Thank you. I think this is a very, very important issue. And it's one that does need to be addressed, but it also needs to be addressed in a manner that we treat it accurately. Now, when you look at the salaries with Louisiana, whether it's man or women, we're at the bottom already. Louisiana ranks about 51,000 as the median income. It's upwards to 63 for the entire United States. But in all categories, not just women pay, Louisiana ranks at the bottom. So when you're comparing it amongst other states, it's just going to naturally be less because of the fact that we're here in Louisiana and the state has been mismanaged for so long. And then we have to look at specific instances. I used to work in the entertainment business for about 30 years. And the majority of the high level, senior level positions in that industry were women. And I found that everything worked beautifully together. So I need to look specifically at what occupations are not attracting women to those higher level positions and why, in order to really address the issue.
That's time. Thank you.
Thank you. That is time, Mr. Lux. We appreciate that response. Mr. Belzer, your response to the same question.
All right. Well, first of all, I've been in business for 28 years. And if it wasn't for my wife, I would be broke, bankrupt, and I would be completely out of business. I can guarantee you that. It's a worldwide problem, and I hate it. I mean, a lot of the companies will just give a man a job because they're a man, and it shouldn't be that way. It should be, if a woman is better at that position, she should have the position. And women nowadays are waiting later and later and later to have children just so they can expand their career to get into the field that they want to get into. And that's another thing that shouldn't affect whether or not a woman is better than a man. If they are better at that job, they need that job. The pay needs to be the same. There should be a straight pay across the board. And if a woman gets it, she gets the exact same pay than if a man gets it. And, I'm going to say this. I know I'm going to have a lot of guys that are going to hate me for this, but, women are generally better critical thinkers than guys. Guys think with their, they think with something they shouldn't think with, and they're bronze, but women are better critical thinkers. And I feel like women should be, that shouldn't be not allowed to have the exact same pay as men. They should be equal.
That is time. That is time.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Belzer.
Yes,
Next, Mr. Craig, your response to the same question.
Obviously, it's an issue. Women have been struggling for equality and to be treated properly since the beginning of time. The 19th Amendment was only ratified 100 years ago. There are still challenges to women everywhere they turn. I don't think the government can legislate that. I think women need to take the bull by the horn and quit putting up with it. Women are essential. I know in my office, without my paralegal, I'd be lost. She gets paid really well. But it's not a legislative problem. It's a societal problem. Women need to quit putting up with it. if they apply for a job and they see a man that's getting the job that's not as qualified as them, they should point that out to their prospective employer or to their employer. Say, hey, wait a minute, I'm doing more than him. You got to pay me more. I'm out of here.
10
If
seconds.
women take responsibility and get on top of it, I think that they will get what they deserve, which is equality.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. Thank you all for your comments for women and pay equity. Moving on to our third question. And this question comes to us about voter apathy and the mobilization of voters. It has been said that Louisiana doesn't have a voter registration problem. Instead, it has a voter engagement and mobilization problem. Do you support establishing Election Day as a federal holiday? And what is your message to get citizens to vote on November 8th and then again on December 10th? We'll go in reverse order. Mr. Craig, we'll start with you.
Yes, I think voting day should be a holiday. It probably should be a Saturday instead of a Tuesday. And I agree that getting voters engaged is a serious problem. Voting is what makes America great. That and the rule of law. The candidates need to engage people to get them out to vote. Organizations like this are very important in inspiring and engaging people to get out to vote. It's tragic that we're going to have an election November 8th, and I'm hoping that we get a 50% turnout. That's terrible. How do we go about it? Organizations like this, candidates, parties, everybody needs to be involved in making sure people understand the importance of voting and making them understand that every vote counts.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Belzer,
Yes.
voter apathy.
I mean, I definitely think Super Tuesday should be a holiday. It's already, all the children already get off because the majority of the schools have the voting machines in the schools. So yes, it should definitely be a holiday. As far as voting, the problem nowadays is there's so much money involved with it. We need to stop the flow of money that's going into these super candidates, 10, 20, $30 million. We need to regulate that. And we need to get it back to where, you know, the voters actually hear us. They see what we have to offer. And they come out and they're excited about voting because, hey, I'm going to make a difference. I can tell you how many people are like, well, why should I vote? It's not going to make a difference. You know, the education of the voters is tremendous, but also we need to be available for them. And there should be something to regulate the amount of money that we spend on elections. It is unreal the amount of money that is spent on elections every year. And that needs to stop.
That is time, Mr. Belzer. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know that minute goes fast.
Yes, it does.
Guys, when you're on a roll, I understand. Mr. Lux, your response.
Yes. I do believe that voting is one of the fundamental rights and benefits of being an American. And it should be treated with that element, with that level of dignity and decorum, and not made to be something that anybody that is, you know, we're allowing people that are not citizens now to vote in certain states and certain jurisdictions. So I take pride in the ability to vote. Is specifically in regards to the election day becoming a federal holiday, I would support that, because I do think people need to take the time and the care. Some of the issues that we're voting on today are so complex and so convoluted that you can't just willy-nilly go in and start checking boxes. You need the time to dedicate and research each one of these issues that are being voted on. And I think making it a federal holiday will allow people some of the time to do that and fight the lines that just continue to get longer and longer as the population grows. So I would be in support of that as a federal holiday.
Thank you for that, Mr. Lux.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to check to see if there are any questions in the Q&A. We have volunteers who are manning the Q&A box. Are there any questions in the Q&A? audience questions have come in the Q&A box?
Yes. We have one question.
We do have one question. What is your position on the student loan debt crisis? What suggestion do you offer to fix it?
Student loan debt crisis. Let's start with in the middle, Mr. Belzer.
Yes, ma'am. Well, I don't agree with forgiving student debt. You went to college. Every one of us before you went to college paid our college bills. We did it. Just because you have incurred debt does not mean that you should not be allowed, or you should not have to pay that debt off. That was your decision. You signed the paperwork. I do not agree with any of the student debt relief that they're talking about, because I mean, it basically just hurts every single taxpayer in this country. So I am for, if we got to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep extending it, that's fine. But no, you need to pay your student debt off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Belzer. Mr. Craig, student loan debt, how do we fix it?
Well, the banks need to have some skin in the game. Right now, you have banks that are lending money to basically unsophisticated teenagers. They don't really understand what they're getting into. The loans are guaranteed by the government, so the banks lend the money. If the student defaults, the government pays the bank back. Those debts need to be on the bank. Also, the debts, like any other debt, student loans should be dischargeable in bankruptcy. If you find yourself with an impossible debt and no way to pay it, you should be able to discharge that debt, which is currently not an option for student loans. Finally, the colleges need to make it affordable for students that want to go there. There should be more grants, more scholarships, more access to education for everyone. When I went to college, tuition was $160. I'm not sure what's happened since then, but it sure has gotten out of hand. But the main problem is the banks don't have skin in the game. They just throw money at it. The universities love it because they get a bunch of money, and ultimately the students get saddled with a raw deal. They should be able to get out from underneath it through discharge and bankruptcy, or by the banks being more responsible in their lending practice.
That's time, Mr. Craig. Thank you. I do want to remind you all that these questions are still 1 minute responses, and that minute does go fast. We acknowledge that. Okay, and last, Mr. Lux.
I'm opposed to the forgiveness program for two separate reasons. One is the president doesn't have the legal authority through executive order to write off that debt. It needs to go through Congress. So you've seen it challenged now in the courts, and I think the courts are going to show that he doesn't have the authority to do that. Secondly, I think it only encourages and rewards irresponsible behavior, because it undermines those who did work and did sacrifice to make timely and full payments on their student loans. And I don't think that the burden should be transferred to taxpayers. Perhaps we can have a sympathetic approach to people that have gotten into a financial debt through their student loans, but that they're not necessarily making the amount of income to pay that off. But when they set it at $120,000, if you're earning $120,000 a year and you can't pay your student debt, you need to go back to school and take a budgeting class. So the way that it's structured, it's just unfair on many, many different levels.
Thank you. That is time. Thank you so much, Mr. Lux, for that response. We're going to go back to the moderated questions, and then we'll come back to the audience questions if there are more in the Q&A. So we'll come back to those in just a moment. Our next question comes to us from the Mu Sigma chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, and also the Ascension Alumni chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And it is on women's reproductive rights. This is a very hot topic as we are seeing around our country right now. The United States Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson reversed Roe v. Wade and provided that a woman does not have a constitutional right to an abortion, and shifted the power to the states to regulate control of access to abortions. Do you believe that there should be full access to women's health care, including contraception and abortion? And as a follow-up, if no, do you believe there should be exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother? We'll start with you, Mr. Lux. And remember, it's a 1-minute response.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack in 1 minute here. It is a very, very controversial issue. But I think what happened, in my opinion, and whether the legalities of Roe versus Wade should have been overturned, I think it's better to leave that with the constitutional people. But having it turned back to the states, I think each individual states now have the ability, and you can protest on a local level much more than what you'd be able to do on a federal level. So you have much more say with your local representatives than our federal representatives. But what I think happened overall is for 50 years, Roe versus Wade was upheld. And the spirit of that law, I think it began to become violated. I think the spirit of the law is that abortion should be legal, safe, and rare. And it started to get pushed further and further and further to where people will begin to celebrate the taking of a life, a human baby that is fully developed, has full brain function, heartbeat, moments before it's about to take its first breath. And there's no way that that can be considered a woman's right to choose or a woman's health, because we now have a full human baby that has to be considered.
Thank you. That's time. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Deborah, as well. Appreciate that. Next, we'll hear from Mr. Belzer. Your thoughts on reproductive health.
As far as reproductive health, okay, I feel the Supreme Court got it right. There is nothing in the Constitution that says the federal government is in charge of abortion. It's a state level issue. I am pro-life, but I feel like in cases of rape and incest that an abortion should be allowed, because incest is not as big of a deal as it used to be. But rape, yes, I've got a daughter, but it's her choice. If she does not want to carry that baby to term, then that's her choice. So yes, I agree with rape. The other issue is, if it's a medical issue that involves the mother, medically wise, I don't consider that abortion. I consider that a medical issue that needs to be taken care of.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Belzer. And lastly, Mr. Craig.
Well, as I said earlier, reproductive health care decisions are the woman's choice. It's not my choice. It's not the government's choice. It's not the state government, the federal government. I don't care what government you call it. Each individual makes their own choices. People make good choices and bad choices, but it's not my place to tell them what to do. Contraception should be available. Sex education should be taught in schools. People, abortion as birth control is a little bit creepy to me, but sometimes I can't imagine the circumstance and situation some women might find themselves in. But once again, it's not my decision to make. The choice belongs to the woman and no one else.
Thank you, Mr. Craig, for that. Okay, we're going to move to another set of questions here. Next up on our list, where's my timer? Next up on our list is, do you believe that representation matters? And if so, how will your staff reflect the community that you will serve? And specifically, what percentage of your staff will reflect minority women? And Mr. Belzer, start with you.
Yes. I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, man, woman, black, white, Indian, or whatever. Okay, if I have a need, okay, I can't go into Congress. I don't know everything. So I'm not going to be able to go into Congress and do everything that we need to do. I'm going to ask for help. And there's a lot of people out there for help. I've got a a senator that I love to death. And if I do get elected and she doesn't, she will come to Washington with me. Mr. Rufus Craig will help me out in Washington. Everybody will help me in Washington. It doesn't matter race, color, or anything. And I will make sure that the entire country, and
10
especially
seconds.
District 6, is represented with my staff. Guaranteed.
Thank you, Mr. Belzer, for that. And thank you for recognizing it takes everybody to get this
Yes.
done.
Yes, it does.
All right, Mr. Craig. Representation on your staff.
The most competent people I can find, regardless of race, gender, etc. Actually, it's not something I've even thought about. I know that in my office, I have African Americans, I have women, I've had, I mean, to me, it's not a function of your race or your gender, it's a function of your competence. My staff, if elected, would represent the most competent people I could find, regardless of where they come from or what their sexuality is. I wouldn't think of it in terms of identity. I would think of it more in terms of, do they know what they're doing, and can they help me represent the people in my district?
Thank you. And finally, Mr. Lux.
I share many of the same sentiments as Mr. Craig, in the sense that I like to look for character and competence in individuals. You know, and I had mentioned earlier that I had worked in the entertainment business out in Los Angeles, and probably 30–40% of the people that I worked with were every aspect of the LGBTQ community, every ethnicity, every race, every gender. And if they're good at what they're doing, they're going to rise to the surface. There are certain situations, however, that I do have to admit, where there are certain communities where you do need to have an insider working with you to give you the details of what it's like living in those communities when you haven't in fact lived there yourself. And it's the only way that you can get the full spectrum to come up with the decisions and policies that are going to help
10
everyone.
seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Lux. Okay, are there questions from the audience? We're going to pause again. Questions from the audience. In our Q&A chat, if you placed a question in the box, Ms. Cheryl?
Yes, we have a question. What can you do about the infrastructure in Louisiana? We have a high demand for more lanes on the interstate, potholes that need fixing, and we need street lights, sidewalks, crosswalks, and cross lights. Also, the public transportation system in Baton Rouge.
Thank you for that question. We'll start with you, Mr. Craig. Traffic, Baton Rouge, not good.
It is not good. Right now, I think the main thing everybody's worried about is the interstate. I would start by fixing the exit at the end of the bridge to solve that problem. They're talking about spending billions of dollars and shutting it down for 3 or 4 years. It's, I guess, the government's typical solution. Those things, just throw money at it. I think that the money should go to the local government. The mayor's office should decide what street needs to be fixed. I think we've got the green light program going right now. You know, clearly it's a money issue and getting it done. I think that the Congress just threw a lot of money at it. We'll see how that works out. I know it's going to work out good for some engineers and contracting firms. I'm not sure it's going to work out for us.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Craig. Mr. Lux, traffic, Baton Rouge.
Well, listen, traffic is a problem in any major city. And some of that is going to be mitigated by just the changing in the work dynamics, with more people working out of their homes. But we just received a big influx of money from the infrastructure bill. We got about $7.25 billion that came in. But I think there was a lot of money was left on the table. You know, when you look at Louisiana, in terms of the amount of money that we received, we were 23rd in states. But yet we were the 10th in terms of bridges that needed repaired and 15th in terms of annual driving costs. So we left a lot of money on the table that should be coming into this city. In terms of New Orleans with the potholes. I mean, there's potholes in New Orleans that have trees growing out of them. They've been there so long, right? That is something that we need to get on the local level and find the bottleneck and break through it. There's millions of miles of beautifully paved asphalt throughout this country. There's no reason why we can't do it here in Louisiana.
Okay. Mr. Belzer.
Well, I'm of the sense that, you know, as far as Washington right now, if if the cookie jar is not big enough for everybody to put their hand in, they don't want to do it. I mean, there's so much that can be done in the state of Louisiana for traffic. I mean, all I have to do is look at other states. Arizona, before they build a subdivision, it's 6 lanes going into that area where they're going to build a subdivision. It's amazing what other states have done that Louisiana's not even looking at. I mean, it's ridiculous. But again, it's politics, and that's what I hate. There should not be. I mean, let's just face it. It's bureaucrats. It's bureaucratic. There's just not enough. I don't know how to say it. I'm so passionate about this. I just there needs to be more accountability. Let's put it that way. More accountability.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for those responses to that question. Are there any other questions in the Q&A from the audience? Question?
Yes, ma'am. Let me get to them
Councilor-
quick.
Councilor
Give me one
McKellen?
second. Yes, ma'am. Here we are. With inflation and low wages in the state of Louisiana, how are students expected to be hopeful for the future?
Okay, how are students expected to be hopeful for the future with a state of inflation that we are experiencing? Mr. Lux, pose that question to you first.
Okay. Well, I think they can be hopeful by voting in candidates that's going to turn around the policies that are causing much of the inflation right now. On one, there's a double wick that's being lit. The energy costs, because we've made fossil fuels a demon without having the appropriate energy to replace it with. And I'm not saying I'm against green energy. We need to continue to move forward in that pattern. But the energy costs are driving up inflation, and then runaway government spending is also adding to it. When you combine that with supply chain shortages, we have the hyperinflation that we're dealing with right now. So proper policy will help bring that down. The optimism comes from you as an individual. You need to be passionate about your future, what you're looking to do. It's your passion that's going to bring you hope. And that hope is going to transcend whatever type of obstacle you're going to be faced with. And that's what I'd like to send the message to college students, is that they need to come from within. Don't look for external forces to help.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lux. It is time. Okay, same question, Mr. Belzer.
Well, I mean, I love Louisiana, and I feel like the students in Louisiana, I mean, I feel like Louisianans are awesome. I mean, we take care of ourselves more than anybody else. We need to keep our Louisiana people in Louisiana. And that includes more trade education. As far as the college side of it goes, you know, these college kids come out of college and they have no idea what they're going to do. These trade school kids come out of trade school, and in 5 years, they've got a house, they've got a boat, they've got a truck, they're driving down the road, and they're enjoying life. And we need to put more money into trade. And, you know, if you're going to college, that's fine. But we need to put more money in the trade, and we need to get this state back to the way it used to be, a great state and a great district.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Craig. How do we-
Okay, inflation's a difficult problem. The primary source of inflation is the government's been spending money they don't have for years now. You have more money chasing the same number of goods, price of goods go up. As far as hope for the future, I believe that our constitutional republic is the best form, the best government on the planet. So the hope for the future is that there's been hope in the past, there's hope in the future. We maintain what we have, the right to vote, the rule of law, freedom to do what you want to do when you want to do it. If you don't hurt other people, then there is hope for our students. But they can't look to the government to provide them with that hope. They have to look within themselves and recognize that it's incumbent on them to do the best they can within the best system on the planet.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. We're going to close out our questions right now so that we can move to the second portion of our forum for this evening. And so as we do that, I would ask that each of our candidates for House of Representatives, if you will give us a 2-minute closing remarks rather, that last 2 minutes. And we will start with you, Mr. Lux, if you will close us out as the candidate as one of the candidates rather for District 2.
Thank you. And Robin, I want to thank you. You're a great moderator. You're very poised and dignified, and you brought a lot to this conference. But I'm just going to make it very basic. There's so much that can get distracted and confused. But the voters in District 2, they have 2 choices: me or Troy Carter. That's it. That's the choices right now. And I think, as I said before, there's not a day that goes by that we don't find ourselves shaking our heads in disbelief of what's going on at the hands of career politicians. Things that are happening on a federal level, a state level, and a local level, to me, is inexcusable. In fact, I would go as far as to say that any leader that's been serving in District 2 over the past 2 years should be ashamed of the record that's happened. And I'd be begging for forgiveness if it was me. We're at the bottom of every measurable scale in economy, in infrastructure, in opportunity. But I don't see that happening. It's almost as though they're proud of the decline. And I think that lack of self-awareness is a big problem. I had mentioned that there's 90% of the country is concerned about inflation, 75 no longer feel safe in New Orleans, and 85% feel we're going in the wrong direction. And I believe these people are right. I believe we are going in the wrong direction. And whether he likes it or not, or wants to admit it or not, my opponent, Troy Carter, is one of those career politicians that's been leading us down the wrong path. He voted in favor of the administration's policies that's gotten us into this mess 92% of the times. So I want to keep it simple. Just look what's happening around you. Violent crime has been surging. New Orleans is now the murder capital of America. Gas prices continue to soar. Inflation is red hot and it's not slowing down. The public schools are failing our kids. Immigration is at record high. The only growth that I see in New Orleans are the potholes. So all of these issues are issues that impact everyone. And they're all going in the wrong direction. So this is how we keep it simple. A vote for Troy Carter is a vote to continue in the wrong direction. A vote for Dan Lux is a vote to reverse our course and start moving in the right direction of safety, prosperity, and freedom. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Mr. Lux. Closing comments from Mr. Belzer.
Yes, again, like Mr. Lutz said, thank you very much for having me on this forum. I'm not a career politician. I've never been involved in politics, but I feel like that, somebody that is just the common ordinary Joe, that's what this country was founded on. That's who started going to Congress to make these laws and to set the spending bills and everything. I'm thankful for women. Let me tell you, this is a women's forum, and I feel like women have been treated very poorly over the past, however long. And it's time for y'all to get out and get going. I wish there were more women in the representation than there are now. And the same, like I said before, I have Miss Sarita to thank. She, my daughter loves her, and she's a woman. And my daughter's like, Daddy, why aren't there more women voting? are more women running for, not voting, but running for office. And I'm like, I don't know, they're scared that they're not gonna get in, or they're scared that, something's gonna happen and they're gonna be treated differently. No, I mean, we're all on a fair playing field, and we should always be on a fair playing field. It doesn't matter race, gender, anything. But the biggest thing that I want y'all to take out of this is, and I know it's hard to imagine, but we need God back as the focal point of our country. That's the biggest thing I have to say. If we put God back as the focal point of our country, then we're going to be great again, whether it's man, woman. But yes, women, y'all need to get back involved in everything that goes on in every government aspect. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Craig.
As the other candidates say, thank you all so very much for having me tonight. It's great to have an opportunity to speak to a group of such distinguished women. I think it's interesting to listen to my Republican friends, Mr. Belzer and Mr. Lutz, talk about how put a Republican in there, things will be better. We've had Republicans and Democrats running this country for 100 years now. Neither party seems to stand for much anymore. I've been working to create a third party for 25 years now, because I truly believe a third party would go a long way toward correcting a lot of the problems that have been addressed in this forum tonight. The government's not going to fix the problems. The issues that we've all talked about tonight are going to be dealt with individually, in the family, in the neighborhood, in the community. I think it's been demonstrated. They just throw money at it. They spent 31 trillion they don't have. I think in my walking around and talking to people in the district, almost everybody I talk to is just frustrated and disgusted with the polarization and partisanship that's coming out of Congress right now. And my response to that is, if you feel that way about it, and you step in a voting booth on November 8th and you pull a lever for a Republican or a Democrat, as you exit the voting booth, I would like you to ponder Einstein's definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, thinking something different's going to happen. The truth is, until we have a third party, until we break up the duopoly, nothing good's going to happen. We have two choices in politicians. We wouldn't put up that with our breakfast cereals in a loaf of bread. It's the only product that we consume where we put up with just having two choices. We need a third choice. I'd like you to consider voting for Rufus Craig, the Libertarian, for Congress on November 8th. Thank you very much, ladies.
Thank you, Mr. Craig, and thank you to each one of our candidates who are running for United States Congress here this evening. We're grateful that you've joined us. We're grateful that you've shared your responses to our questions and that you've shared your time with us this evening. We will now move on, taking a little pause before we pick up and visit with our senatorial candidates who are running for the United States Senate. And as we pause right now, we're going to hear first from Diana Payton, who serves as the Executive Director of the YWCA of Greater Baton Rouge. Ms. Diana, good evening and welcome.
Good evening, good evening. Thank you to all who have participated thus far this evening. I wanted to spend a few moments just to give some highlights and reminders for all voters. Early voting period is today through November 1st. And our early voting locations are open 8:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. every day, except for Sunday, October 30th. If you did not vote today, please make a plan and mark your calendars to vote during early voting if possible. Locations are the State Archives Building on Essen Lane, Motor Vehicles Building in Baker, the Coursey Fire Station, the Central Branch Library, and Baton Rouge City Hall. Be mindful of local football games, plan accordingly, as both our Saints and Jags are playing at home this weekend, so it will be a very busy weekend. Election day is Tuesday, November 8th, and polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. We urge everyone to please use the Louisiana Go Vote app to confirm your polling location now to avoid any confusion on election day. Chat volunteers, please place the links to both the early voting information and election day voting in the chat for all the attendees, if you have a few moments to do that. And now I will ask Ms. Ashley Shelton from the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice to provide the details on absentee voting. Ms. Shelton.
Thank you so much, Ms. Payton. Always good to be in good company with you. So glad to be here. So excited about this space. So excited to see so many women. Really what we know is that Black women are the catalyst for change, both in our families and in our communities. And just excited to see everyone today. And so I'm here to talk to you really quickly about absentee voting. There's several reasons that you can request an absentee ballot, which includes if you're a senior citizen over 65 or older, you can request a one-time absentee ballot or request it on an ongoing basis. If you're temporarily absent and you will be on vacation or out of town, if you're offshore, if you're in a nursing home, your college students that are away from home, clergy, you've moved out of parish within the 30 days prior to the election, but still need to vote from your local, from your precinct. Involuntary confinement, if you have not been convicted of a felony and you are awaiting trial, you absolutely can request a ballot. Hospitalized, also in the address confidentiality program, or a juror. There's also special opportunities for people with disabilities to also request those ballots. So you can go online to the Secretary of State's website to request your ballot. All ballots can be requested both to be printed online from the Secretary of State's website, or you can have it, you can register online to have it sent to your address and mailed to you. That has to then be completed, and then it has to be returned, right, 5 days prior to the election by 4:30 p.m. And so again, that's 5 days prior to the election by 4:30 p.m. And then also, if you meet the following requirements, you can actually turn in your ballot 3 days prior to the election if you are military personnel or their dependent residing outside of the United States or hospitalized. And so you have a different window. So that's 5 days for all of the other reasons, but 3 days by 4:30 if you are military residing outside of the country at the moment or hospitalized. It's very important to have your college students, if they have not registered in the place that they're currently living, that they request their mail-in ballot. We need their vote. We need their voice here in Louisiana. And we also, want to make sure that if they have registered where they are, that they certainly partake wherever they are, in the country. Certainly, the votes of our young people and their voices are needed all across the country. And again, all of this can be found on the Secretary of State's website. There are several links that are linked there. We'll drop it in the chat. I've seen a couple of folks already dropped it in the chat. And so again, you can go there and have those things printed. If folks don't have printer access, and we are working with the Secretary of State to address the accessibility issues, they do have printed absentee ballots at their office on Essen Lane at the State Archives building, but then also to certainly several nonprofit partners across the state, Power Coalition Vote, and others also will provide you a printed copy of the ballot if indeed, the absentee ballot request form, if indeed you don't have a printer or access to a printer. And so we do understand that still continues to be an accessibility issue. And you can also go to any of your public libraries to access computers and or printer if indeed, again, you don't have that access at home. Thank you so much. And I will turn it back over to our moderator, Dr. Merrick.
Thank you, Ms. Shelton. We appreciate that. And I do want to again call everyone's attention to the chat box for those reminders that have been dropped into the chat. Many of these things you've heard this evening, but if you need to follow up, there's information in the chat, and we will continue to drop information in the chat throughout tonight's forum. So we're now transitioning to our senatorial candidates. for this evening who have joined us, and we're really excited about part 2 of our process this evening. Before we hear from our senatorial candidates, I would like to share some rules for our candidates as well as rules for the audience. Our first rule is that we're going to ask that each candidate, or let them know rather, that each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement, 1 minute to answer each question, and 2 minutes for a closing statement. The order in which the candidates will answer questions may rotate during the forum. Questions may also be taken from the audience via our Zoom Q&A. And as moderator, I will maintain order throughout the forum. The purpose of our forum is to provide information and educate voters. Specifically, this is an opportunity for voters to hear your position on issues that impact women. Candidates should not interrupt each other, and all answers and comments should be directed to me. Comments and answers should be responsive to the questions only. Language that is rude, profane, or personally attacks a particular candidate or any individual is strictly prohibited and may result in removal from the forum. Virtual backgrounds with your name and ballot number are allowed, but props are prohibited. So those are the rules for our candidates. We have a couple of rules for our attendees. We're going to ask that all questions and comments should be placed in the Q&A. Audience questions will be addressed after the moderated questions, and we will try to get to everyone's question or as many questions as possible. But due to time constraints, this is not likely to happen that way. So volunteers, will be providing responses to your questions for general information that pops up in the Q&A. Language that is rude, profane, or personally attacks a particular candidate or individual is not allowed in our chat box and our Q&A as well. So we will start by hearing the opening comments for each of our senatorial candidates who have joined us on this evening. And right now I'm going to go in alphabetical order. So if you're a senatorial candidate, we ask that you would turn on your camera right now so that we can see you and so that I can see you and know that you're here. But we'll go in this order. Mr. Billiot, we'll ask that you go first. Mr. Beryl Billiot. Good evening and welcome to our forum.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to address this distinguished crowd. For those of you that I haven't had an opportunity to meet, again, my name is Beryl Billiot. I'm a lifetime Louisiana resident. I'm a Christian. I'm a Native American. I'm a veteran of the United States Marine Corps. I'm a small business owner. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. And when I'm elected to the United States Senate, I'm committed to securing a prosperous future for our kids and our grandkids and all the children of the great state of Louisiana. And for all the residents, I stand for God, for family, and for freedom. And, there are several things that we have to do. We have to provide real leadership to the people of Louisiana. We have unique circumstances that we can work under. The bipartisan politics that we've been playing, that made our country great in the beginning when two opposing ideas came in the spirit of compromise to come up with a solution that works for everyone, has turned into opposing ideas coming together in the spirit of competition, where one side wins or the other side loses, leaving the people of the United States and of Louisiana floundering in the aftermath of the inadequacy of their leadership. It's important that we secure our nation's borders, that we provide true education and increase the quality of our public education system, because we talk about job creation and bringing business back to America, but we have an unready workforce. So we have to work in a systemic manner to improve the atmosphere for business, to make it more appealing to those businesses to come and create jobs within our borders, both within the state and within the nation. The healthcare of the American people is of utmost importance. A lot of talk is being done about government control over healthcare.
Mr. Billiot, that is time. We have a timekeeper. I will share with everyone. Ms. Deborah Pogue is serving as our timekeeper this evening, so you will hear her voice chiming in to let us know that it is time to wrap up on our questions, and we're being very strict with that this evening. Next,
Got it.
thank you again, Mr. Billiot. Next, we will hear from Mr. Gary Chambers. Good evening.
Good evening, and thank you all for having me. My name is Gary Chambers, and I am a product of North Baton Rouge, a small business owner, but my best title is I'm Zoe's daddy. I have a 12-year-old daughter that is a beautiful light to my life, as well as the reason why I fight. For me, this is very simple. I am in this race because our state ranks 50th in the nation. We rank number 48 in healthcare. We rank number 48 in education, 46 in healthcare, 47 in opportunity, 49 in environmental quality, 50 in crime. I believe we rank 50 in crime because we rank 47 in opportunity and 48 in education. We need a U.S. Senator who spends more time focused on the priorities of the people rather than talking about crackheads on TV. We need a U.S. Senator who has priorities to advance the policies that will actually produce change for people in our communities. I am a pro-choice candidate. I have never wavered in that position. I believe that reproductive rights are under assault in this nation, and we need a senator that protects them. I believe that student loan debt should be forgiven. I heard a lot of commentary earlier about student loan forgiveness. When we were talking about PPP loans and $200,000 to small business owners, we paid those. We can surely make sure that the children of the future have an education that is affordable. And if that education was not affordable, that we give them a pathway to living a prosperous life in this country. We talk a lot about crime today, and crime is a real problem in this country, but we must also talk about what are the root causes of crime. We have not dealt with our crumbling education system. We've not dealt with the fact that we don't have after-school programs for our children, that we don't have enough resources. How long?
10 seconds.
Okay. I'll finish the rest later and tell you how we win, but thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Next, we're going to hear from Mr. Zan John. Mr. John, are you with us? I don't see Mr. John. He was in the box earlier. Moving on to Dr. Vinny Mendoza. Dr. Mendoza. I don't see Dr. Mendoza either. Next, we will hear from Mr. Salvador Rodriguez.
Can you hear me? Yes. My name is Salvador Rodriguez. I am, oh, wait a second, on the video. My video didn't start. I can talk.
And
okay,
Mr.
it says host. Okay.
Mr. Rodriguez.
Host says,
no,
okay.
No, sir, your name is showing as Margie
All
Alexander.
right, there we go.
Mr. Rodriguez, just so you know.
Yeah, this is my mother's tablet. Mine got broken. But anyway, my name is Salvador Rodriguez. I am number 10 on the ballot for U.S. Senate. I am a native of Chicago. I was born in Chicago, but raised partially here in the state of Louisiana in Tangipahoa Parish because I couldn't crack the weather as a child in Chicago. But I grew up down here in Tangipahoa Parish. I went to O.W. Dillon. I'm the son of an African-American mother and a Latino father. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy. And I am running because of the blatant disregard for the current elected officials, neglecting their oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution out of partisanship. And that's basically, as a veteran, I took an oath similar to the oath of office that they take, and I'm not happy with the way that we're being represented or the lack of proper representation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. And also have joining us this evening, Ms. Sarita Stive. Ms. Stive.
I was trying to get into a quiet space for you guys. So thank you so much for having me. I'm here to join you all and have a few words and answer a couple of questions. My name is Sarita Staub. I was born in Vacherie, Louisiana, raised in Vacherie, Louisiana. I currently reside in Metairie. I am a licensed and certified clinical laboratory scientist, and I also am the founder and executive director of Operation Restoration, which is headquartered in New Orleans, Louisiana. I spend a lot of my time fighting for our community and the rights of others. My organization is focused on helping currently and formerly incarcerated women and girls transition back into society after incarceration. I'm the only candidate that is in the race that has policy experience to begin to execute policy on day one. I've successfully advocated and worked towards 17 pieces of legislation across this country on state and federal levels over the last 5 years. Our first big piece of legislation was Act 276, which removed the question of college applications for purposes of admission. So people who are now going to college in the state of Louisiana no longer have to check the box. We made Louisiana the first state to do that. I'm looking forward to being in conversation with you all today. I'm running for U.S. Senate because I believe that our state deserves leadership that actually cares about the state and someone who will continue to fight for the rights of women and all constituents of the state of Louisiana. So I look forward to answering any questions that you all have tonight. And again, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us this evening. So we're going to hop right into our questions. We do have several questions that we have in place already, and we've asked those in the audience if they have questions to also chime in with questions in our Q&A box. So we're getting started. Our very first question comes to us from the Baton Rouge chapter of the Links Incorporated, and it is a fiscal question. What are your budget priorities and how do they impact women and families in Louisiana? And Mr. Billiot, we'll start with you.
The first thing that we need to do as a nation and as representatives is to come up with a balanced budget amendment. It's important that we quit living off of loans and quit putting the taxpayers in debt and future taxpayers for many generations. We're spending more money than we have. We need to prioritize our spending. Just like in any home or in any business, you have a certain amount of money to work with, and you have to put priorities to those. And then the amount of money that you spend is based on what is available, only what's available, and not what you can borrow. The issue that we have, there are several different government agencies that are taken into account that are spending tons of money. Our government is growing at an alarming rate. Most of the jobs created in 2018 and 2017 were government jobs, growth of government agencies stuff. And so it's important that we look at how we're looking to grow and reduce the legislation and untie the hands of the law-abiding people in America. And we need to
Thank you, Mr. Billiot. That is time. I do want to remind everyone that these questions, we're going to ask that you keep your responses to 1 minute. The minute does go very quickly, so please keep that in mind to be as responsive as possible, but as succinct as possible as well. So Mr. Chambers, we're coming to you with the same question. Budget priorities and how do they impact women and families?
So one of the things that President Biden did that I thought was a good thing was the child tax credit. I think that that's something that we should bring back. It helped us deal with child poverty in this country. It helped families and households have extra income into their families to be able to pay their bills. When you've got wages rising, bread is higher, gas is higher, but the wages are not higher. We've got to find a way to increase the wages in this country as well. That is a budget priority for me when we talk about making sure that we write legislation that gets us to a livable wage. The other aspect is fighting for resources for our state. John Kennedy voted against infrastructure dollars. That's $6 or $7 billion of resources. Those resources come in, they create jobs, they help stimulate our economy. When the economy is stimulated, businesses are growing, specifically Black women-owned businesses being able to be a part of the government process, and contracting is a priority for me also.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chambers, for that. Next up, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, the same question for you as well, sir.
Okay, could you repeat the question briefly?
Sure.
Something
The question was,
about the budget. For women.
yes, sir. What are your budget priorities and how do they impact women and families in Louisiana?
Okay, budget priorities would be to make sure that the wealthy are paying their fair share so that the money's in the till that we can actually produce a viable budget for that. But also to make college more affordable and to keep people and give them a fighting chance to do what they need to do to have comfortable lives and make them productive members of society. But as far as the actual number of budget dollars, we can do better by, like I said, taxing those that don't pay taxes. They have astronomical wealth and not paying their fair share, and that would lead to various opportunities to more program for women and children, or as they call it. Oh, that was quick. Okay.
10 seconds left.
Basically, just tax those that don't pay their fair share, and then we can add a lot of money is needed to affect everybody as best way as possible.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for that response. Next.
Yes, so my budget priorities in a minute would definitely be to focus on how we are allocating money to the states from the federal government, specifically around insurance, how we are allocating money to different departmental cities and parishes, looking at in the states how money is being drawn down, I think is extremely important. I think when we talk about money in the budget for infrastructure, I'm not just talking about roads and bridges. I'm also talking about how communities are set up to be successful. I'm talking about infrastructure as it relates to water and how we have all of these issues with water systems in these smaller parishes. You know, Jackson was on the news for the months and months, and so was Flint. But we also have many Flints and Jacksons inside of Louisiana currently. So my budget priorities will really be looking at how us as a state in Louisiana are drawing down money and how we can maximize the allocations that we do have.
Thank you, Ms. Dodd. That is time. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Vinny Mendoza has chimed in to join us this evening. Good evening, Dr. Mendoza. What we will do is we'll pose this question to you as well, and also allow you 2 minutes to give your opening statement and respond to this question all in one. If you can take 2 minutes to introduce yourself and 1 minute to respond to the question.
Thank you for the opportunity to address this forum. The main reason why I've got involved with this election is basically because I'm concerned about the economy, and particularly with low income and middle class families not being able to make ends meet. I come from a low income family. My father was a trash collector working 16-hour days. So I know what it is not to have food and a nice home, but I know that the American dream does exist. So if you work hard and you persevere, you can reach the American dream. And I believe that I have reached it. And now it's time for me to share that knowledge with people that need my help, especially low-income people. And right now we have inflation that has hurt the pocketbooks of every low-income family and middle class. And now we're looking into having a new Great Depression in the next few months. OPEC has announced it's going to reduce the production of oil, and that's going to create a global recession and a Great Depression in the United States. So things are going to get actually worse in the next few months. Right now, we have 60% of all the farmers in the United States are affected by drought. So food is going to be scarce. So I have a specific economic plan of an agrarian reform act that will provide 5 million new farms and create 25 million new jobs. And that will allow people to have more food locally. But the crime is something that's, okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendoza, for that. And the question, Mr. Mendoza, that we posed to everyone was your budget priorities and how they impact women and families in Louisiana. Did you want to?
Sure. The budget priorities will be with considering a bailout funding for low income and middle class families. And with that, I mean, I believe that $350 million would allow for to thrive the economy of low income and middle class families. Right now, we have the U.S. government has bailed out the airline and auto industries for more than $4 trillion, and they don't have to pay anything back. But those are tax funds that people have put into the government. And now it's time for the government to bail out the American people. So we need to ensure that some of that money comes back to us.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Dr. Mendoza. We're going to take a pause just for a moment of clarification. I want to turn it over to Attorney Kimberly Lamott in response to Mr. Zain John.
Thank you very much, Dr. Merrick. I appreciate that. I just wanted to come on very quickly and tell everyone that Mr. Zain John had confirmed for this evening, and he was on, and I don't know if it was a technical difficulty or what have you, but I've tried to call him twice to see if I could get him back onto the webinar. I wanted to make sure in case he has any supporters or anybody from his team that's out there. Again, we are nonpartisan, and we want to just make sure that, you know, you all have confidence in the integrity of the process that we have put forth for tonight's forum. So I'm still trying to get him on because he did log on for the tech check at 6 o'clock, but I'm still trying to get him back on to tonight's forum. I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that. And if anyone from his team or any of his supporters are on, please, you know, contact him, message him, and let him know that we're trying to get him back on. Thank you all very much. Dr. Merrick, back to you.
Thank you, Attorney Lamont. I appreciate that. So going on with our questions, our second question comes to us from the Power Coalition for Equity and Justice, and it is a child care question. Child care is the backbone of our economy. Yet in Louisiana, child care costs almost as much as a public college tuition. And 2/3 of young children have both parents or their single parent working. So childcare is the single highest expense for most families, not only in Louisiana, but in our country. What do you think the role of the federal government is in families having access to quality early care and education? And if you are elected, how will you address substantially increasing access to quality early care and education for working families in Louisiana? Ms. Stibe, I would like to start with you on this question. Ms. Stibe, you're muted.
I'm sorry, my screen was frozen. I think that childcare costs is an extreme issue across the country today. I know myself, when I had my son 11 years ago, that was the most extreme challenge that I had, trying to pay for childcare and going to school at the same time. I think the role of the federal government in making sure that childcare is affordable is making sure that we can cap quality daycares and that we can cap the amount of money that we're spending on these programs for people who are making a certain amount of money and that come out of pocket. So capping the out of pocket costs and being able to subsidize early childhood education, not just for the working families, not just for the single parent, but for childcare as a whole. I know a lot of middle class Americans that are working also can't afford childcare, or childcare takes away a lot of their disposable income as well. So we need to find a way where the federal government can definitely subsidize childcare.
Ms. Stibe, I'm sorry, that's your time. Thank you.
No, it's fine.
Thank you for that. Mr. Salvador Rodriguez, if you would respond to that question.
Yes, I believe the answer to that is to bring up people of lower income to make it a livable minimum wage. That's the first start, so that people have more money to do that, and also have the federal government to increase funding to like programs that help parents get by with their cost of their keeping their kids, so that they can actually go to work and not have to be relying upon the system to do what they have to do in order to make ends meet. But childcare is definitely one of those areas that is in need of some real help. And I also in support of initiatives like the Lilly Ledbetter equal pay for equal work for women, and the oh, that's it, 10 seconds, okay. But yes, it would be incumbent upon us to do something to make funding available for parents and working parents to take care of their kids and cover the cost of raising their family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Mr. Chambers.
One, I think that we've got to raise the minimum wage. If you make $7.25 an hour in this country, that means you make $1,100 a month. Everybody on this Zoom knows that if you make $1,100 a month, you can't take care of yourself, let alone a child. There are countless families and women and fathers out there who are trying to provide for their families with wages that don't meet their ends. And so that's one aspect. The other is, I think the federal government should look at how can we reappropriate resources from military spending and put more resources into the Department of Education. Those resources should help us subsidize not just how do we get children before the pre-K age into school, but also how do we build after-school programs for other children, because parents who are in these situations often that need this care for their children that are young also need after school care for their children because they need the capacity to make sure that their children are provided for while they're at work.
Time. Thank you, Mr. Chambers. And Mr. Billiard.
1 minute is not enough to discuss the systemic problem that goes on with childcare. I've heard, several different things, and I believe that the federal government should work to subsidize that revenue and give businesses an incentive and tax credits to allow to pass on to their employees to use that money for childcare. Now, one thing I want to do, people keep saying raise minimum wage, raise minimum wage. You realize that healthcare, childcare workers, some of those are minimum wage employees or low wage employees. And if you raise their wage, the cost of that childcare goes up. So you have to think of this from a systemic viewpoint, right? So if you raise the wage of the person caring for that child, how can you lower the cost of that childcare? So you can't think in short terms, you have to think long term. And as a legislator and as a representative, you have to find out a way to handle all the aspects of this within a reasonable part. And education is a way to do that, and increasing our education availability and increasing the value of the worker so that they can work more money, not just raise the floor. Thank you.
That is time. Thank you, sir. Dr. Mendoza, the same question for you.
I believe the early childcare should be available and affordable. And one way to accomplish that is by the government subsidizing that expense, particularly to similar to the Head Start program or the pre-K. Those can be expanded so a 11 months old child can be accepted in any of those programs, but more resources need to be provided to those programs like the Head Start and pre-K. And that's the only way that we can meet that need.
10 seconds.
Because it's a nationwide problem that it can be solved in that way if the government subsidizes Head Start and pre-K programs.
Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. I'm going to pause for a moment and check to see if there are questions from the audience in our chat box, in the Q&A chat. If there are questions in the Q&A chat. I think we do have
Madam
some.
Moderator. Yes, we do.
Yes, Dr. Gooden.
Yes, this is addressed to the U.S. Senate candidates, Mr. Billiard, Mr. Chambers, Dr. Mendoza, Mr. Rodriguez, and Ms. Stibe. This is from an audience participant, and it is Ms. McCoy. She's asking, what are the top 3 issues you plan to address if elected to office?
So the top 3 issues that you plan to address if you are elected to office. And if I heard you correct, Dr. Gooden, this question was addressed to all of the candidates?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So we'll start with Mr. Rodriguez.
Okay, the top 3 issues. All right, we will eliminate the assault rifle, or ban that. B, recodify Roe v. Wade so that all of this unnecessary rigmarole about something that has been working for 50 years is put back to where it was. And then B, the economy, as well as ending corporate greed, because a lot of the overhead that the prices that consumers pay is inflated by corporate salaries of the executives who are making 300 to 400 times worth their average daily worker who puts in the most work in the club, in the company. So those would be my 3 things.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Ms. Stibe, your 3 issues that you would address if elected.
The 3 issues that I would address if elected, first, I would address the issues of reproductive rights for women. I think that the reproductive rights of women are under attack in this country and it must be addressed. And I think it's the tip of the iceberg. So we started with Roe versus Wade and it will move into Griswold versus Connecticut. And I think we have to be aware of that and keep that at the forefront. The second thing that I would address would definitely be the economy, looking at minimum wage, bringing that up, making sure that we are fighting toward economic policies. And I think the third thing for me would be really focusing on how we could support the state of Louisiana to begin to export more of the products than we are importing. Louisiana has some of the richest soils in this country, and we are exporting less and importing more, and we are not utilizing what we have here in this state to grow our economy. So those would be the 3 things that I would focus on immediately.
Thank you, Ms. Stibe. Same question, Dr. Mendoza.
I would deal with economy, crime, and healthcare. Right now, inflation has burdened every low income and middle class families, and the inflation was created by big oil companies manipulating the gasoline prices and stopping oil production. And they are about to create the Great Depression. So we need to be concerned about that. But crime is really hurting many people, regardless of your social status. You may be rich, but you cannot walk around the block anymore because you can get killed in New Orleans. So people are afraid to go there and to the French Quarter to have fun anymore. So we need to face that head on. And I have a police box program. They would solve the crime in New Orleans and also the economic problem with inflation.
Time, Dr. Mendoza, thank you. Thank you for that. Mr. Billiard, your top 3 issues that you would address.
The top 3 issues that are in my focus is national security, securing our borders, and making sure that America is a safe place to live and free from tyranny and attacks from foreign nations. Improving our decaying education system, both to allow for further growth of the American worker, to make them more valuable in a field that is going out. Right now, we have, as a business owner, I know firsthand, we've got people coming in applying for jobs that are not qualified. And so we're looking at it. We talk about raising the minimum wage, which I am not in favor of. I'm in favor of raising the value of an individual through their marketable skills and to make them more valuable. We live in a free enterprise capitalistic society where the government has no place in the business. And the next thing would be judicial reform.
10 seconds.
The judicial reform where we look at untying the hands of the American people and reduce the amount of incarceration for nonviolent criminals and to work on a system that is, rewards good and punishes bad. Thank you.
That is time, Mr. Billiard. Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Chambers, your top 3 issues should you be elected.
So I'll break it down this way. The 3 issues that I'd like to address from the federal level are reproductive rights, voting rights, as well as contract equity. The federal government does a terrible job of giving equity in contracts to Black and brown business owners. From a Louisiana perspective as a senator, when I talk about the numbers that we talk about, where we're 48 in education, 46 in healthcare, 47 in opportunity, I want to be very strategic and intentional about doing work that helps us address the issues around economic opportunity, around our education system and healthcare.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Okay, we are going to touch on a really key issue that's going on in our country right now. And this question comes to us from the Mu Sigma chapter of Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated, as well as the Ascension Alumnae chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. And it has to do with women's reproductive rights. The U.S. Supreme Court decision in Dobbs v. Jackson reversed Roe v. Wade and provided that a woman does not have a constitutional right to an abortion and shifted the power to the states to regulate control of access to abortion. Would you support creating an exception to the Senate filibuster rule to allow a vote on a bill to codify Roe? And would you vote to support full access to women's health care, including contraception and abortion? And as a follow-up, if you're answering no, do you believe there should be exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother? Now we're going to offer 90 seconds for the response on this question because it's a little lengthier. So you'll have 90 seconds to respond. And we will start with you, Mr. Rodriguez.
Okay, I'm not sure. You're right. It's a lengthy question, and the answer is yes. I would support a filibuster to take a vote on that because I think that this whole Roe v. Wade was something. It was partisanship. Roe versus Wade was in place for almost 50 years, and I definitely support the exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother. But I'm supportive of that and women's rights. I'm not a fan of the act of abortion, but I know that we're not perfect. The God I serve is a forgiving God, so we make mistakes. But I would definitely go for codifying Roe versus Wade and the exceptions of rape, incest, and taking a vote on the Senate floor for letting that come back to becoming codified. I hope I answered all of the 3 parts of your question correct, succinctly enough, excuse me.
Thank you. Yes, we were giving 90 seconds on this question. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. Dr. Mendoza, your response.
Yes, I do support the end of the filibuster and also codify the Roe versus Wade. But, I also, this is a subject very dear to me because one of my sisters, a younger sister, Roxanne, she was raped and murdered by many men. And also my youngest sister, Vivian, she was raped by her military superior. He was forcing her to have an abortion. So she ended up taking her life with a gunshot to her head. So to me, I know that women go through a lot of struggles because they are left alone. It takes two to have a woman pregnant, and there's a lot of talk about women and abortions, but nothing is mentioned about the man that impregnated them, you know. So I get these little notes from people saying that 63 million children had been killed by abortion, illegally or legally, but we had 63 million cowards that have not stood up to the women that they impregnated, like the guy that's running for Senate. And so I will sponsor the Lorena Bobby Pigwee Acts Act, which would cut the penis of men that impregnate women. So
Thank you, Dr. Mendoza, for that. Your time is up. Thank you. Mr. Billiard.
The constitutionality of Roe versus Wade, I am not a legal expert when it comes to that, and so when you look at it, it's kind of difficult to understand without having all of the details that were presented in that case. So to make a determination of that is well beyond my abilities as far as the constitutionality of Roe v. Wade. Now, although me being pro-life, I'm also a realist in the real world, and I think that there should be circumstances that would warrant, the need for an abortion. But what I want to say is that many courts across the nation have already determined that the killing of a fetus is murder. In fact, if a person is killed in an automobile accident, a woman that is impregnated, that has a fetus, the driver or the person that created that has been charged with double homicide. And so because 2 lives have been taken in that accident. So we as a nation have to determine, what do we declare as life? What is the consequence of taking that life? And I believe that the killing of a fetus is in fact a murder, but there would be circumstances where it's justifiable. And so how do we determine as a nation when to apply and when not? We have this double standard across the board on lots of issues, and this is one of them. A life is a life when you're killing someone driving a vehicle in a double homicide with a pregnant lady.
That is time.
But it's not a life when she decides to take it.
Thank you for that. We know this was a passionate question, but that is time.
Yes, ma'am.
We're going to move to Mr. Chambers. Your response to the same question.
I had to take a minute after that. I am certainly pro-choice. I have always been pro-choice. I believe that a man should never get between a woman and her doctor, because there are no women getting between me and my doctor unless it's a nurse. And so for me, I believe that we have gone too far. We have a radical Supreme Court. As your U.S. Senator, I will not vote to appoint justices that are of the ideology of Amy Coney Barrett or a Brett Kavanaugh. For me, when we look at this issue, we have to also look at people who talk about being pro-life but support the death penalty. People who talk about being pro-life, but when people like Alton Sterling were killed in the streets, they always have an excuse for why it was justifiable. I think that we need United States senators that have the courage and the temerity to tell the truth, even when it is uncomfortable. Scripture tells me, for all of those who say that this is a biblical issue, in Corinthians, for why am I being judged by another man's conscience? For why am I being judged by another man's conscience? We should not be judging other people's decisions. That is a decision, if you are a person of faith, between you and your maker. And I promise you, I got enough to talk to Jesus about. I'm not worried about your issues.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. And lastly on this issue, Ms. Stibe.
Ms. Merrick, before you start my time, can you repeat the question? Because I'm lost. There was so many different answers. If I'm correct, you asked about codifying Roe versus Wade, and then you also asked about the filibuster. Am I
Right.
correct?
Next, would you support creating an exception to the Senate filibuster rule to allow a vote on a bill to codify Roe? And would you vote to support full access to women's health care, including contraception and abortion? And as a follow-up, if the answer is no, do you believe there should be exceptions for rape, incest, and the health of the mother?
So I'm gonna give you two simple answers. It's yes for the exception to the filibuster and yes for full reproductive rights. And I think full reproductive rights means everything that women need in order to maintain reproductive health. I think that when we talk about reproductive health, people want to just focus in on abortion, but we don't want to talk about that Louisiana also is a leader in the country on the high maternal mortality rate, especially in women of color. That is also a part of reproductive health. We have to be able to address all of the issues that women suffer from. I, in my last pregnancy, spent 5 days in the hospital as a healthcare professional, a licensed clinical scientist in the state of Louisiana, spent 5 days in the hospital because I was not believed by my doctors that I was in pain. And my daughter was born with shoulder dystocia, and I was bleeding on the inside with a hematoma. I think when you talk about reproductive rights, we have to address how people, specifically women of color, are treated differently in childbearing, how we are losing women's lives hand over fist because we have a healthcare system that is not rooted in equity as it relates to reproductive rights. Reproductive rights are not just abortion, it is abortion. It is healthcare. It is all of the things that women need in order to maintain. And even though I myself believe that I don't believe in abortion for myself or my family, I am pro-reproductive rights and pro-choice.
That is time.
Got it.
Got it. You know, it's a hard question. Thank you.
You can't give the one woman the same amount of time that you give all the men. Like I have a special interest in this topic. But okay.
Personal interest. I understand.
I digress. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you for that, though. And thank you, each of you, for the passion displayed in responding to that question. We're now going to move over to talk a bit about poverty. 1 in 4 women and girls between the ages of 12 and 44 lives below the federal poverty line. One statistic provides that 1 in 4 teens miss class during their cycle due to lack of access to menstrual products and resources. This statistic is echoed as 1 in 4 women struggle to purchase period products due to a lack of income. Further, this creates and expands a gender gap in education. Louisiana recently eliminated the state sales tax on menstrual products and diapers. Would you agree to support federal legislation that exempts these products from being taxed federally? Why or why not? So Ms. Stibe, we're going to start with you on this issue of period poverty, as we call it.
Oh, Lord. How much longer I have for this?
We're back to 60 seconds.
Back to 60 seconds.
1
All
minute.
right.
Yes, ma'am.
So definitely do not believe that things that we are not in control of should be taxed. I have fought in the Louisiana state legislature and also on a federal level around the pink tax and making sure that if we are not taxing menstrual products as well as diapers. So for me, this is something that I work to pass on a state and a federal level. It's called the Dignity Act for incarcerated women. In the programs that we ran inside of the prison, we also found that women were not coming to classes and participating in services that we were given because they didn't have sanitary napkins or items. They charged people who are indigent for these products inside of institutions, schools, in prisons, inside of hospitals. These products are rations and they are not free. And we know that everyone has a different level of their cycle. So I think that if we are not charging men for products that they need, we should not be charging women for the products that they have no control over.
Thank you, Ms. Stibe. That is time. But we do understand. Thank you.
Yeah, I know y'all understand.
Mr. Billiot, your response.
First, I'm trying to understand how from a federal level, we're collecting tax on those products. It's normally a state and a local level that collecting sales tax on it. I do agree that there should be on things that you need and can't control, that we have to look at this, but we're talking about all this legislation to control some things in that I don't believe that the government has any business in dealing with it. The communities need to come together to find an answer to some of these problems. Families need to pull together. We have a big disconnect in our nation where the family system is broken. You don't get the support. A lot of families don't have a father in the room because we promote illegitimacy in our system. A young woman, in certain positions get more help when they're single than if they get married. And so it changes. This is such a complicated issue, and something definitely needs to be done, but I don't think.
I'm Mr. Billiot, thank you. And just for clarification, I believe that exemption that we're speaking of in terms of, or the tax exemptions, if you would, in terms of your income tax filings. I think that was the interpretation on that question, just for clarity.
Okay.
Mr. Chambers, your response.
Everything Ms. Stibe said.
Thank you, sir. And Dr. Mendoza, your response.
Yes, I would support that tax exemption, but I'm more concerned about the poverty in general. 8 out of 10 children from low income and middle class families, when they go to school hungry because they may not have food for breakfast. So a child that cannot eat before he goes to school, before he or she goes to school, cannot concentrate, cannot learn anything. So we need to be more aware of a need for better nutrition in schools to provide children with the breakfast and lunch so they can better prepare themselves, they can learn more. So that's something that we'll work on, a program that I want to provide for all children. So they are fed before they start class every day.
Slight departure from the question, but okay. Thank you.
I use my time.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mendoza. I understand that Mr. Rodriguez had to leave, so we will not have his response on that question. I do now want to go to our audience questions that were in the Q&A. If you're an audience member and you have a question, please place it in our Q&A box. And so we're going to turn it over to the Q&A. Is that you, Attorney?
We have one question. We have one question. Oh, okay.
So Dr. Gooden, go ahead. You're fine.
Oh, one question. It's from Ms. Castro. In regards to women's rights, how will disparities in African American maternal mortality be addressed? And that's for all of the candidates. Thank you.
We'll start with you, Mr. Billiot.
The first thing that we need to do is truly employ an equality in healthcare. The differential in treatment is evident. And so we have to make sure that we recognize people for who they are, not what color their skin is, but to have equality in treatment. And, some of the issues in reading some of the issue about maternal mortality, a lot of it has to do with genetics, and there's nothing we can do about that aspect of it, but we can improve access to adequate health care and to make it affordable to all of those that are in need. And so in order as a representative of all of Americans, regardless, we have to make sure that our healthcare system is affordable, it's adequate, and is equally distributed amongst the population, and not just given to the wealthy and the well at hand. It needs to be, of course, most of the sickness and illness comes to the lower income, and if we can get them healthy and keep all of the citizens healthy and productive, then it becomes a much better situation for all.
Thank you, Mr. Billiot. Mr. Chambers.
let me start by saying that genetics is not the problem with the issue of maternal health in this country. Before I ran for office, I did some advocacy for a couple here in Baton Rouge. The woman had a baby here at Women's Hospital, and to make a long story short, because they believed that she was on Medicaid, they would not transfer her child to Texas Children's Hospital. She is suing Women's Hospital. I support Medicare for all because in this country, we should not have a divided healthcare system where the haves and the have-nots are treated differently, or Black or white people are treated differently because we are believed to have different care. We know that historically that doctors have thought that Black folks had thicker skin than white people and do not give us equitable treatment. We need to also fund Black institutions that educate doctors at a degree that produce more Black doctors to ensure that we get equity in healthcare.
Thank you, Mr. Chambers. Dr. Mendoza.
Well, I believe healthcare should be provided to everybody, regardless of the income. And Medicare for all, I support that. Today I had an experience. My daughter was denied healthcare for her daughter, for my granddaughter, because her insurance had not kicked in yet, and they wanted her to pay like $500 in order to be seen. They have TRICARE, military TRICARE insurance. So, that's a problem that we have in many hospitals and clinics, that, they turn people away and they don't provide the healthcare they need. So we need to make that available for everybody, regardless of color or gender. And I'm going to work hard to be able to provide healthcare, Medicare for all.
Thank you. And lastly, Ms. Steib.
So I think that I disagree a little bit with Mr. Chambers. It does have to do with genetics. People that are genetically predisposed to melanin, Black women, those are the people that suffer from high maternal mortality rates. And for me, it is really about talking about addressing the implicit bias that is in the training of our medical professionals. The only genetic predisposition to high maternity rates is Black women, and we are the ones that suffer. We are the ones that are dying. We can't course correct, autocorrect. We can't take it away. We can't downplay it. We can't not talk about it. You have to acknowledge the fact that Black women die at a rate higher than any other population during childbirth, and it's specifically around.
I
think she dropped.
We lost Ms. Steib. Okay, and
that happened to me earlier. She may jump right back in.
Okay, and if she does, we'll pick back up. Turning it over to Attorney Lamont. Attorney Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Merrick. We appreciate you. I believe we have another audience question from Ms. Kimberly Brent. Did you have another audience question?
Yes, we have one more. What is your opinion on more working from home jobs to reduce the cost in paying for gas prices with the top of inflation? And that's for all candidates.
Well, let's start with Mr. Billiot, if you could start that question for us.
When it comes to things like this, I don't think the government has a say. I think it's up to the individual businesses whether or not they can or cannot work from home. We start dealing with, getting into regulating what the businesses can do as far as whether people have to work from. It becomes an issue. You're taking away the capitalistic nature of our society. And so I think we need to make sure that no one's discriminated against and that we hold businesses accountable to what they're supposed to do. But we cannot go in and think about we're going to regulate everything that businesses do, make them pay people certain things and make them do this and make them do that, because we take away the whole issue of what made America great, the opportunities. We're down this hill of going into socialism where the government owns and controls everything, and that's not what we want as a nation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Billiot. We appreciate that. We're going to go to Dr. Mendoza for that question next.
I believe it depends on the type of work that you do. If it's a technical type of work that you do, it's okay if your employers is okay with that. You know, they can easily check the amount of work that you do. And actually, if you're at home, I believe you're more productive because you're more relaxed. But, you know, I also support a 4-day work week, which is being utilized in Europe and other places, and which can, you know, really increase productivity. So, you know, it's something that needs to be communicated and agreed upon between the employer and the employee. But I support that. But I don't know if we can make a federal legislation to make that happen. So.
Okay, thank you. And it looks as if Ms. Stibe was able to join us again. Ms. Stibe, are you able to hear us and respond? I see her.
I can respond. I didn't hear the question. My son called me 3 times back to back and kicked me out of the Zoom. So
No
I'm
problem.
sorry.
The question is, what is your opinion on more working from home jobs to reduce the cost in paying for gas prices with the cost of inflation?
I think that more working from home is fine if people are able to work from home and execute the job from home. I think one thing that COVID taught us is that we definitely can get creative and work from multiple spaces and different places. I don't know if I would say that we should be working from home to save on gas. I think we should be working from home more to support mental health, to really have people be able to separate from the grind of every single day going into the office and having that mindset that the only way that people can execute is from the office. But I think it should be up to each individual and employer to offer those packages to their employees. But I do think that we need to address inflation and we need to address the rising gas prices. But I don't think that we should just be accepting them by having people work from home.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chambers.
So I try to tell people all the time, I think that there are things that I have the power to do in this role and things I don't. I don't know if I have the power to tell somebody whether or not they can let somebody work from home or not in their private business. I think that that's an overreach of the government without us talking about unionization or some other things. I do want to say that the government and capitalism is a problem in a large way for a lot of us, because capitalism only works for the capitalists in many situations. And it has not produced an equitable economy. And in order for us, I agree with Ms. Stein, to deal with gas prices, we need to deal with the root causes. Exxon made, I think, $17 billion in profits in the last quarters while we were paying those exorbitant gas prices. We need to make people pay their fair share in taxes so that those companies don't pillage us every single day.
Okay, well, thank you all for those responses. We appreciate that. I'm tempted, I'm looking at the time, but I'm tempted for one last question because I think it is important. Again, this is When She Votes, and this is focusing on women's issues. Quickly, I need to ask you all quickly to answer this. It's about women in elected office. Louisiana has had 3 U.S. senators that were women. Rose Long was appointed to continue her husband's term, Huey Long, and Elaine Edwards was appointed by her husband, Edwin Edwards, to continue Alan Ellender's term. Collectively, they served for a little over a year. And then Senator Mary Landrieu was elected and served for 18 years. What is your opinion about the current state of representation of women in political office on the local and national level? And specifically, what will you do to encourage more female representation in the state of Louisiana in elected office? We're going to go first to Ms. Stibe.
So I think it's something that is very important to me. That is why I am in this race, and that is why I'm running. The other little fact that we have, whether it's on a local or national level, Louisiana has never elected a woman to a statewide office in the history of the state, a Black woman in the history of the state. So Senator Mary Landrieu is the person that has happened, but it is despicable that it has only been one. We have never had representation in a statewide office of a Black woman. And that is why I'm here. That is why I'm running. And I think that I will do everything in my power to continue to support whether I am successful in this race or not, but to encourage and support any woman who decides to run, because the race that I am running should not be this hard because I am a woman, and it's directly tied to that. And I vow moving forward to make sure that I am supporting the leadership of women locally and statewide, as I have always done and will continue to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chambers.
I can tell you, I thought I was muted, I'm sorry. I can tell you the things that I have done. I helped to elect Mayor Sharon Weston Broome and worked on her campaign to help her get reelected because she was the right person for the job and a great leader of our city. I've helped to elect countless women on the local level, as well as endorse and gone all over the country in the last year, helping women from Erica Smith in North Carolina to Nina Turner in Ohio, because I believe that they were the right person for the job. Here in Louisiana, we have a huge deficit in leadership with women across the board, but we also have a deficit in leadership statewide in Black folks in general. It has been since 1873 since a Black person has held statewide office in this state, and we know that we have the capacity to do something about that come November the 8th.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Mr. Billiot next.
Yeah, I think it's important that we encourage as many people as we can to get involved in our political system. The more involved we become, the more understanding that we have in how our system works. You'd be surprised at how many people across our state in general don't even understand the realm of the government, how it truly works. And I've had the opportunity to educate and to possibly provide information and links to different people to understand the system, but encouragement through education, through knowledge, through availability, and to work hand in hand, both with women, men of color, of just all Americans to get involved in our system, because the only way that we can overcome and succeed is together. And until we decide to come together and work together, that we will never be the nation that we're destined to be. And, you know, it's a challenge when you look at how the system is dividing us in every aspect of our lives, and we need to work to come together and overcome that bridge, overcome those challenges.
Thank you very much for that response. Dr. Mendoza.
Becoming a member of the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee would enable me to support the idea of packing the Supreme Court to 11 and making sure that women become the majority in the Supreme Court. I think that's something that would make a big difference in the nation, especially would enable women to be protected by women in the Supreme Court. So that's something that I would do, concentrate in doing to make sure that all women's rights are respected and protected.
Thank you very much for that response. We appreciate that. And thank you all for indulging me with that one last question. I just had to ask that for some answers tonight. We are going to move into our closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to make a closing statement to the audience. And we are going to begin with Dr. Mendoza. Let's stick with him.
Thank you. Well, to me, inflation is a primary issue that affects all of us. And I will concentrate in fighting inflation, and big oil companies are the ones that created inflation in the current technical recession that we are under. And by regulating them, we should be able to take that power away from them of stopping oil production whenever they feel like it, or manipulating the price of gasoline. That's what created this inflation, and we need to regulate them to be able to control inflation and recession. So, and then I would also deal with crime head on. We need to, I want to provide a police box program where we have a police box every 10 blocks within the city, And that is a program that's been used in Japan for 100 years and has made Japan the lowest crime country in the world. So by concentrating in crime and economic development, I would think that it would be the best way to provide for the needs of the low income and middle class families. We need to invest in the American people, and I will fight to get at least $350 billion in bailout money for the American people for low income and middle class families. We need to have a national home insurance program that protects all homes. So we have now insurance companies going up in price 30, 60%, and some are not insuring many people. So we need to concentrate in the problems that are keeping us awake at night, and that is crime and not being able to make ends meet.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Mr. Billiot for his final 2 minutes closing statement.
Thank you very much. You know, I'm an independent candidate in this race. I have no loyalty to the Republican or the Democratic Party. My loyalty stands with the American people. In December of 1985, I made an oath, and I took the oath to defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I served my time in the United States Marine Corps, both domestic and abroad. And I want to continue my service to this great nation. We all have a point and a part to play in the success of this nation. Freedom is always one generation away from extinction. And we need to make sure that we continue to fight the battle to keep America free. We need to join forces together to overcome the obstacles that we face. The bipartisan politics that we play leave Americans in the aftermath of inadequacy because they come into the spirit of competition. We need to bridge that gap between the Democrats and the Republicans. We need to find a way that works for all. We need to have a smaller, more efficient government and reduce dependency on the government, increase the value of the individuals to where that they can go from poverty to prosperity. And only through American ingenuity and through the opportunities that are presented, then we need to make sure that those opportunities are there. And I understand that there are situations and there are communities in this world that that opportunity does not exist. And we need to make sure that that opportunity re-shows back up, that we put the resources in those areas that it's needed, improve the schools in the impoverished districts, and make sure that those children are educated and given the tools necessary to succeed. And we need to do it together. The arguing and the bickering is not going to solve the problem. We need real leadership that is willing to cross the aisle, that is willing to compromise, that is willing to find a way forward, and to truly have the hard conversations that need to be had honestly and openly. And we need to talk about equal pay for equal work. We need to talk about pay disparity between men and women and whites and blacks. And we need to truly face the issues head on and come up with a long-term solution and get out of the whirlwind of solving this problem now. Thank you. Beryl Billiot, number one.
Thank you so much, Mr. Billiot. We're going to go to Mr. Chambers now. Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, and thank you to each of the organizations and all of the women who put this conversation together tonight. These are important questions and important conversations that are necessary. With 14 days left to the election, I'm going to shoot it straight with you. I am the lead polling Democrat and the only person that is on this Zoom with an opportunity to be in a runoff with John Kennedy. But that does not happen without you. It does not happen without us contacting every person in our family and network and mobilizing them to do so. We have seen in the past where organizations and groups have come together, we mobilized, and we elected John Bel Edwards. The question that I have for us is, when are we going to put the same effort and energy behind a candidate who looks like us, who thinks like us, who shares our values through and through? That's why I'm on the ballot. That's why I'm running to be a real Democrat, fighting for the issues, to find out for true, can a Democrat win in this state, statewide, believing in the policies that we stand for. We know that Kennedy was elected with 536,000 votes. There are 900,000 registered Black voters in the state of Louisiana, 1.2 million eligible Black voters, and 30% of white voters consistently do their job and show up and vote for Democrats. In the election where Kennedy was victorious, 28% of Black voters in New Orleans showed up, 32% of Black voters in Baton Rouge, and 28% of Black voters in Shreveport showed up. Why do I tell you that? Because in the election where John Bel Edwards won, 50% of Black voters showed up in each of those cities. We know that we have the momentum and the juice to be able to turn out the Black vote at a higher rate than any other candidate on the ballot. And in a runoff, if you are going to beat John Kennedy, that is how you're going to beat him, by mobilizing the base of the party and building from there. The last thing I will say to you is, I want your support, your prayers, and your vote, because the change that we seek for us and our children is possible if we get out and do our part.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Chambers.
Thank you.
And we're going to go to Ms. Stibe for her 2 minutes.
Well, thank you so much for allowing me to go after Mr. Chambers, so I don't have to repeat any of the facts and the statistics. So thank you, Gary. I can just tell him why it should be me. But no, I am also asking for your prayers and your support. I'm number 12 on the ballot. As I often stated before, I'm the only candidate in this race that has the ability to start executing and passing policy on day one, leveraging relationships that I've already built in my past legislative work. But even more than that, I am also, when Mr. Chambers talks about the polling data, he's absolutely right. But I also know that we don't poll our community, and the people that I represent and I support don't show up in this polling data that people are releasing. I think that we have an opportunity here to do something great, which is send John Kennedy home. And I'm also asking that we turn out the vote and that you come out and you vote on November 8th and starting today for early election to really send him home. Our voices matter, our voices count, and we have to do our job. We have to continue to show up and demand more, expect more, and require more of our vote and who we are and how we show up in this state. I think Louisiana has some of the most amazing people in the world. I do not believe that our representation currently supports that or even facilitates that idea. And I'm also asking for your prayers and your support. I'm number 12 on the ballot. My name is Sarita Stibe, and I am ready to work for you and with you. I cannot do it alone. And on the day that I take office, I need to take office with all of you standing there beside me. So I really appreciate the time, the invitation, and this conversation. And I look forward to seeing many more of you soon out on the campaign trail. And again, my deep gratitude and appreciation.
Thank you very much, Ms. Stibe. With that, I am going to turn to Ms. Denaj Piper to bring us on home, to land the plane for us. Ms. Piper, it's all yours. Thank you, candidates.
Thank you, everyone. As we close out this night, we hope that you are better equipped with the information needed to support the candidate that speaks to you and your family's causes. We would like to thank the candidates for participating and attendees for joining. Lastly, we encourage you to get out and vote and bring someone to the polls with you. Remember, when she votes, we can reclaim our voice and our power with our votes. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you all.